Hi there. If you are struggling with mold issues and maybe you're struggling with them and don't even know it, you clicked on the right video. Stay tuned till the end because we have some really important information for you. Hi, I'm Dr. Cori Stern and welcome to my channel, Take Control of Your Health. I have a wonderful guest with me today, Dr. Jess Petros, who is actually an expert in mold. And Dr. Jess, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cori. I'm really honored to be here. So a little bit about me. I actually trained in Western medicine. I went to school at the University of Louisville and was board certified in internal medicine and practiced as a hospitalist for almost 7 years, which means I had to admit and know something about everything that came to the hospital. I did that for almost 7 years until I started to sort of see cracks in the system. I didn't like how they were feeding the patients. I didn't like how most of them were discharged on 50 medications. And so I quit. I became a disruptive physician and then quit being a hospitalist and got trained in functional medicine, ozone, cannabis, and now my specialty is stealth infections and environmental toxicities.
You go, girl. You're my hero. Awesome.
It's been a crazy ride. It really has.
Yeah, but I'm a good one, and we need more doctors like you in the world for sure. Yeah. So mold is apparently a very widespread issue, especially here in the US. I don't know about other countries, but you were telling me earlier about some of the reasons this is happening.
Yes. It's unfortunate. Most people, when I tell people I specialize in mold, they say, well, isn't mold everywhere? You know, I mean, everyone is subjected to mold, which is partially true. But what makes mold a bigger gun, like a bigger monster than it should, is the way we're building homes these days. We're building homes that really aren't congruent with the way nature intended. We're using a lot of drywall, which ironically, when it dries, or when it's wet, it never dries. And there's some mold species that really love the cellulose content and grow out of control in gypsum or drywall. Moreover, we created this sort of energy efficiency home in the 70s, and it's great for energy efficiency. It's really bad at airflow, proper airflow like nature intended, which lets mold overgrow and without being checked.
I guess that's true for office buildings as well, that the energy efficient office buildings, that sick building syndrome, probably a lot of that has to do with mold.
And schools, oh, the worst, the old school systems too. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, I remember smelling mold and mildew in my school when I was a kid. Yeah. I didn't even
Wow.
think about that. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, honestly, smells bring back memories for sure. And I think that if most of us our age thought about like the middle schools and the grade schools we attended, we might remember some of those unusual smells. I know I do too.
Yeah, that and ammonia, the strong smell of ammonia that they use to mop the floors with. So yeah,
Yep.
we're all our kids are poisoned. So let's talk about some of the first of all, let's talk about some of the symptoms that people suffer from when they're exposed to mold.
So there's a gradient with this. And some people, I call them canaries in a coal mine, when they walk into a sick building or a building with water damage, they immediately know. They'll say, we have to get out of this building. I can't be in here. And those people immediately experience a loss of cognition or inability to think clearly. They may feel their chest is tight and they're having trouble getting a deep breath. They may even feel a little bit of panic, like they're going to pass out. It's a very almost doomsday feeling for people who are very sensitive. For other ones of us, like me, who aren't as sensitive when we walk into a moldy building, we may experience what looks like allergies. We may get, a runny nose or itchy, watery eyes or sneezing. And then if you live in a water damaged building or you're chronically exposed to these mold spores, sometimes people don't realize the musty smell they're breathing is responsible for their autoimmune condition later on, because mold is powerful enough to spin the immune system out and kind of go underground and lead to conditions later on that we wouldn't even necessarily connect.
This is going to be weird, but one of my favorite TV shows is Forensic Files. I just like the science of kind of starting from the end and working your way backwards to figure out stuff. And there's this one episode about a family that lived in a beautiful house. I think it was in Texas. And all of a sudden, the little boy started to become developmentally disabled, and the father started losing his memory. He was like in his 30s, and they diagnosed him with early dementia, and nobody knew why. And the wife was not affected, and she was, or she didn't appear to be affected, and she was on a plane. She was on a business trip, and she started coughing, and she coughed blood into a napkin, and the guy sitting next to her looked at her and said, "Lady, what in the world is wrong with you?" And she said, "I don't know." And he goes, "Do you have water damage in your house?" And she goes, "Yeah, we do. We have a leak." And it turned out that he was a mold remediation expert.
What an angel sitting next to her on a plane.
Exactly. Yeah. The sad part was they had very serious black mold all over their house, and it could not be cleaned up. It was too late. They lost the house, and their insurance would not pay for
insurance is the worst.
Loss. Yeah.
It's the worst. They don't cover anything when it comes to houses and mold. They don't understand the detriments. I'll tell you, that reminds me, Ted Nugent's wife. Ted Nugent's wife also had mold and has the gene that makes her sensitive, and you can watch the trailer to a film called Killer House. It was her house. She went on MTV Cribs and did a whole tour of how amazing the house was, and it has water damage. So that just goes to show your listeners out here, you can have the most gorgeous, spectacular house. It doesn't mean you're dirty. It doesn't mean you're unclean. It doesn't mean you have poor hygiene at all. At all. Mold can really hide behind the walls, even in a beautiful place like that.
Yes, I actually have an issue with it in my own house.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I'm a lot more aware of it now after learning more about mold from you. So let's just talk about, there's a lot of different types of mold. How would somebody be able to know or figure out if they had mold, a mold situation in their home?
That's a good question, because mold is, the classification of it's pretty confusing. You know, there are a number of different species that can produce a number of different types of spores. We call them mycotoxins, and there's 300 to 500 different types, we think. So that's like a lot of different mold species to know about, right? It's a very new area of science. And so if you really want to know what's going on, there's a number of different ways you can test this. First of all, A, you can test your body, right? B, you can test the home. And it's really helpful to do both of these things so you can match up if the type of mold spore that's bothering you, and you have these vague symptoms like shortness of breath and fatigue and brain fog and maybe autoimmunity. You need to check to make sure your symptoms, the same mold spore that's in your body is in the walls in your home, because then we can kind of match up and say this picture along with your symptoms makes sense.
So how do you test for mold in your body?
So my favorite test is a urine mycotox test. Now, these are, lots of people can be dumping mold spores out of their body because lots of us are exposed. So you really need to match up symptoms with this test. It's really easy. They drop ship it to your house. You follow the instructions, send it in. A month later, it tells you what kind of mold spores you're urinating out of your body.
Interesting. Okay. And then if you wanted to have your home tested, what's the easiest way to do that?
There are lots of different ways to do it. And I will say that testing the home is probably a little bit more confusing for people than testing their body. And that's because you have a lot of different opinions out there. Some people are in the know and others think they know and they don't. And so I really like what's known as an ERMI test, an environmental relative moldy index. And that is an Environmental Protection Agency developed test. And what it comes in the mail, it gives you to vacuum, to sweep, to swipe certain things in the house, and it's able to do an air analysis on what it finds. Now, this test isn't perfect either. Sometimes the average number at the bottom looks a lot better than it actually is, because you have to look at each individual mold spore to ensure that it's not too high on its own, because they average up the total at the end. And sometimes that average total can look a little bit better than if you look at each individual mold spore, because individually they can be too high too. And then, you know, you'll have people that you need to maybe come in to remediate if you find a score that's too high for your health. And then you really need to find someone who understands that mold can make you sick. Because if they don't understand that, they're not going to take it too seriously when they cut things out of the house.
Yes, I have seen many, many patients that are sick from mold. And I remember when I first started doing the work that I do years ago, I had a patient with a young, started off as a baby, and then I was seeing the baby 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and they were always just getting sick with what looked like a cold. Both of them, the mom and the kid, just kept coming in with this cold, and she kept asking me, why do I keep getting sick? Why do I keep getting sick? And finally I said, do you have mold in your house? And she said, no. And I said, look very carefully, look under your sink in the bathroom. Look. Anyway, long story short, she found it at the bottom of a closet.
Oh, wow.
And they had to move. It was an apartment. They just moved, and then they were fine. They stopped being sick. But I was going to say, the good news is that there are things that we can do to help bodies with, if they are affected by mold, if they're symptomatic. There's a effective natural treatment that we can do to help.
100%. And thank God you told her to look. You know, guys, look in your HVAC, look under your sink, look under your dishwasher, look behind the fridge, look in the closets, right? It's on all those areas. And thank God she had you, because people don't understand that's a neurotoxin. When you guys breathe that into your cranial cavity, these things are like little hyphae and spores, like thread-like structures. So they stick in the cranial cavity. This has been linked to Alzheimer's. It's been linked to neurodegenerative conditions. And it makes sense if there's hyphae that act as neurotoxins stuck in your cranial cavity. Yeah.
That sounds scary.
It's awful. But there are the number one thing you said to prevent this is avoidance, right? That's the number one key to environmental medicine.
Right. And I just want to mention that the technique that I use in my practice, which is it's like a kinesiology technique where I muscle test. It's called nutrition response testing. I don't talk about it too much on this channel because I can't do that unless you're, with me. But I am able to, using that technique, able to detect mold in bodies. But we can also do it via your symptoms, right? So if you need a virtual consult, we can usually figure out if mold is an issue. And there's lots and lots of remedies out there. One of the things that I do this in my own house, is I run essential oils through a diffuser. And if you have a mold issue, you want to get a dry diffuser because you don't want to put more moisture into the air. Mm-hmm. So I use Young Living essential oils. I'm not endorsing them. I'm not saying, oh, that's the best oils. I know there's a lot of controversy about which oils people love, but that's what I use. I'm happy with them. And I have used both the blend called Purification Oil, which has, I think, lemon and citronella, and I don't remember what else in it, very effectively against mold, and also Thieves, which has cinnamon, cloves, rosemary, something else, lemon.
That one's killer. Thieves is great.
Yeah. It really works very well. And
does it have thyme in it? Do you know?
It has rosemary. I don't.
Both of those are great.
Yeah. Okay. When I travel around the country teaching seminars, and I'm teaching in a hotel room, most of the time I notice that the seminar room that I'm teaching in smells like mold. So I take my oils and I just sprinkle them throughout the room, like I'm blessing them, with holy water.
I love that.
Yeah. And the other thing, go ahead.
I was actually going to use that as well with you. If you guys don't know about hotels that have mold, that's really common. We forgot to mention that earlier, but thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually will sprinkle, if I'm staying in a hotel, I sprinkle it. I always notice it when I walk in. Also, I'm very chemically sensitive, more chemical than mold. So I just notice chemicals right away, and using those essential oils saves me. It saves me. from
my
getting
God.
from getting sick. But I was going to say something else about, oh, the other thing that I do, and I do this in my own office. My office is on a sub-level, which has a tendency to get mildewy just from its location, is I put the essential oils on organic cotton, and then I stick them in the vents that is either blowing out my heat or my air conditioning. And that works really, really well also.
Yeah, absolutely, you guys. So the essential oils have the power to destroy the mold spores, and they act as biofilm busters as well. If you guys have heard of Biocide, and it uses essential oils as a biofilm buster with the herbs. So essential oils, they've been had a lot of controversy. I'm not really sure why when we're dealing with much more toxic cleaning supplies in our daily life, but they really have the power to destroy mold spores. I love the idea of putting them in like the HVAC system. That's so smart. Yeah, I love that. I always take binders with me to pull things out, but I think I'm gonna adopt that your policy too with essential oils. That's you can both. I mean, man, you'd be in good shape.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what Dr. Jess is talking about when she talks about binders, there's actually supplements that you can take that help to pull mold out, to bind it. We actually have quite an arsenal of supplements that are helpful if you are suffering from mold in your body. And if you do need help with that, I'll put it on the link. It's my website, drcori.com. You can have a virtual consult and we can make some recommendations. Dr. Jess, do you do virtual consults as well?
I don't anymore. I actually am just focusing on my app on my website right now, because I'm sure you know, Dr. Cori, when you start to do consults over the years, you have this sort of routine you get in where you repeat yourself almost every time because there are certain foundational things that everyone needs to know. And so when I got into a rhythm like that, I thought, gosh, I can standardize this and broadcast this message a lot louder to more people. Not that I didn't love my one-on-ones, but you wanted to hit your message is bigger, you want a bigger crowd. So that's what I'm doing now, although I really do miss the bedside manner.
Yes, and with virtual consults, I miss having people live in front of me, and touching them. So it's something difficult to get used to. We're working on adjusting to what's going on in the world at this moment. But what we'll do is also we'll put a link to your website on the description of this video so people can check out your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. You really want to look, you can definitely empower yourself and understand these concepts. Even if you've never been trained in medicine, you really can become your own best advocate and healer and know the best questions to ask your practitioners and understand your body and know where you're weak and where you're strong. And I encourage all of you to do that because knowledge is always power. And if you know where you're strong and you're weak, you're going to be able to troubleshoot yourself. And it's really important to have that knowledge, in my opinion.
That's fantastic. I love that message. Full agreement, obviously. So I want to thank you so much for giving up your time today. And this was wonderful. And I'll invite you back again if you're willing, because you are a wealth of knowledge and information, and there's so much more that you have to share. And thank you all for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe. Hit the like button if you like this content, and most importantly, please share this with anyone that you know that you think would benefit from this information. And I'll see you guys all again very soon.
Thanks, everyone.